remove the brake caliper, its holder and the hub, and the next step is to remove this bracket. We have to undo the nuts on the back side, but we have these metal tabs that secure the nuts, keep them from coming loose, so we have to hammer these flat. Now let's loosen these nuts, and I'm going to use two ratchets, one on this back side right here and one on the front side to keep the bolt from spinning. Once both nuts are off, let's remove the plate and we can push the bolt out. Now that all four nuts are off, we can remove the bolts along with the backing plate for the brakes, and then of course the bracket is what we really want to remove. And here's the backing plate, and here's the bracket for the brake caliper, and this is what we are going to substitute for a new one. Here are the parts that we need for the brake conversion. This is the caliper, it came with its bracket and this spring. We have the brake pads, the disc, the hose, and the most important part, the adapter. We need to remove the original brake hose, so I'm going to use a line wrench. It's a 10 mm and 17 mm for the hose. Oh yeah, it broke loose, very good. You have to remove the clip. Now it's time to mount the adapter plate, to mount the new calipers, and we are going to mount them so that the caliper is slightly up, and that way it will line up with the stock backing plate or dust shield. One thing that's very important is to put in the lower bolt before we bolt this down, because the steering arm is going to prevent us from putting it in later. Going to put the short bolts in first, and I'll just thread a knot temporarily. Had to use a new bolt up here because the old one's threads were damaged. I can put in the long bolt that holds this arm, and then that's going to keep this bolt captive. So all four bolts are in, everything is lined up. Now we go to backside to put on the tabs and the nuts. Now we are going to do the same thing on the back side. And then I make sure that these are lined up, because these bolts have a flat side that's larger than the others, and that has to be toward the hub. Of course, now we bend the tabs down. Next we are going to put on the hub and the washer has a tab, and that has to be toward the top for it to slide on. This is the left side of the car, so this is a right hand thread nut, and we'll just temporarily tighten this just a little bit, just to make sure that the hub doesn't wobble. Before fitting the disc or the caliper holder, you just need to make a little bend in the shield. It's just the smallest thing, and that way there will be more space for the caliper holder. We are going to put on the brake disc and make sure these holes line up with the holes in the hub. We just put it on loosely because we have to install the caliper holder, and if you remember, the bottom bolt was already in there, so if the disc would be flat, we couldn't get this in. Next, we will install the spacer and studs to make sure that the rotor is flush with the hub. Now we will install the caliper and the pads. We need to start the two Allen bolts that hold the caliper to the holder. And now we are going to install the spring that stabilizes the caliper to the holder. Let's put the little plugs into the bolt holders. Need to install the hose onto the caliper. We thread in the hose. Looks like it started, so it's best to start it by hand to make sure we don't cross thread anything. This should go in very easy. Since the hose comes out of the caliper at a different angle than stock, the angle that the line comes from the body is not correct. So I'm going to bend the line so it comes out toward the back, and then put a bracket here for the hose, so the hose will come toward the back and then go to the caliper. Okay. I clamped a vice grip on the line nut, not the line itself, but the nut, so the line doesn't get damaged, and I'm going to bend it 90 degrees toward the back. Now it's pointing toward this steering box bolt, so I really want it to be higher up, so we're gonna bend it up. Again, I clamped on the nut, not the line itself, and I pushed the nut back from the end just so the bend is not so close to the end. I'm going to drill some holes so I can attach the bracket and then once the bracket is attached, it will hold the end of the hose. When I line up this bracket to see its location, I'm going to line up the edge with the end of the metal line, because that metal line will thread into the end of the hose, and that will be about just right for the location of the hose. The bracket is installed, 2 sheet metal screws, and these were quite difficult to screw in. If they are too easy, then we know that the bracket is too loose. We can get our hose inserted, and then we add the stock clip. We need to tighten the nut onto the fitting. Once we are done, this is what the brakes are supposed to look like. And of course we will have to bleed the brakes and then adjust the wheel bearings and stake the nut, reinstall the cap, and then once the wheels are installed, the car has to be test driven. Try the brakes from very low speeds at first to higher and higher speeds to make sure that everything works correctly. And after a few miles, this is what the brakes look like. Enjoy the new and improved braking efficiency of your Fiat Spider.